Hi, I'm Bob McCoskrie. Welcome to Straight Talk for our 14th episode, where every week you can watch on our website, Family First, on YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Keep Up Gordon, and if you're on Facebook or YouTube, you can share your comments to the panel and submit any questions you have. Let's get straight into it and welcome the panel. And Ronji, it is super exciting to have you back again. Where have you been?
Good to be back in New Zealand.
Okay, we've just missed where you've been.
To India and Nepal.
India and Nepal, okay, well done. And what does the shirt say? Because some people will need a translation.
Yep, so it says tetelestai. So this is one of the things that Jesus said on the cross, and it says, it is finished, and translated in Greek, it means tetelestai, which means paid in full.
Fantastic. Okay. Alfred, how are you? Got that fire in the background? I hope it's not crackling.
It's always crackling, yeah. So out here in the west, it's pretty cold. So nice warm fire, and it's good to be back on.
Okay. Bruce, I think it's actually colder where you are. What were you saying? It was 8 degrees or something?
8 degrees right now.
Okay. They make them tough down your way though, don't they?
They do, yes.
Okay. And above you, it's pretty cold in Taupo, I guess, Christine?
Yes, and Bruce, this isn't a competition, but it's about 3 here. So you're actually warmer.
Very good. And Dr. Ate Moala in Wellington, pretty warm there, is it?
Yeah, a little bit warmer. It's not snowing like Dunedin, but it's freezing here.
And the blank is Dr. Sheree Trotter, who was with us and talking to us. And then just as we came on air, they had a major power cut up north. So they are trying to reconnect, and they will let us know when they are back on. So that's why you've got that sort of ugly looking blank there. Cartoon of the image this week is this one about COVID, the nation's report card, and the teacher is saying, and due to COVID, your math scores were down 9%, and little Johnny whispers to another student, psst, that's almost half. I'm not sure if it's because of COVID that the maths levels have gone that low. And our other image of the week, I wish it was a cartoon, but it's not, is this sad one. It's a cross which was removed from a hospital over the weekend. Any of you guys know which hospital that was?
Later, was it? Or?
No, it was in Canberra. On Sunday afternoon, the cross was removed from Calvary Hospital. Blue cross that hung on the building front and centre was taken down by the government, ACT government, because it is taking over control of the hospital this morning. The hospital was owned and run by the Catholic Church, and as of Monday, both will. It's under control of the government. The government is also preparing to introduce legislation allowing 14-year-old children to access euthanasia. Why are they taking over the hospital? Well, because it's a Catholic hospital that is pro-life, and they won't permit abortion or euthanasia. So this image is a symbol of the tearing down of Judeo-Christian values and forcing all people to kneel at the new cultural religion. And video of the week comes from my friends at Focus on the Family in the United States. This lovely little advertisement that they put together to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of Roe v. Wade being overturned. And it's the inconvenient truth about the unborn child.
Well?
It's positive. We're having a fetus.
Having a fetus?
We're having a fetus.
And here we are.
Would you look at that?
Hi, fetus. Hey, got names yet?
For the fetus? We've got a few we like.
Focus on the Family would like to remind you that no matter where you are on your pregnancy journey,
it's almost here. Keep pushing. Your fetus is doing great.
call it what you want, but the truth does not change.
You want to feel the fetus kick?
It's a baby.
It's still a baby.
There we are. Don't you just love that one? I'm sure that Alla would really appreciate that one. I might play it again next week when she's back. All right, let's get into our free speech moment. And you've got about 90 seconds to get something off your chest. And Bruce, we're going to start with you. And you want to talk about the rioting that's happening in Paris at the moment. So your 90 or so seconds starts now.
Awesome. Well, having lived in France off and on for 10 years, I'm a bit of a francophile. The belle France is not so belle, it would seem. I've been watching in anguished disbelief at the riots in France. They seem to be tearing the country apart. Hundreds of police injured and thousands arrested. Not a surprise, though. Like New Zealand, France has been seduced by the ideology of cultural relativism, compromising its interactions with Muslim migrants. By the way, 10% in metropolitan areas are Muslim. And then, along with the official doctrine of laicite, the total secularization of government, that's contributed to a loss of confidence in what it means to be French. Even the great patriotic song, the Marseillaise, is an embarrassment to some French people. Once called the eldest daughter of the church, with isolated exceptions, churches are almost empty on Sunday. It no longer has that necessary connection to its Christian past. By the way, even homeschools are illegal in France now, and more Muslims attend worship on Friday than go to Mass on Sunday. France, the country that used to almost worship family life, is being brought to its knees by enclaves of young, unemployed and disenchanted migrants, emboldened by the debilitating fruits of cultural relativism, low economic growth, and increasing gang warfare. That has undermined one of the most appealing domestic cultures in Europe. And France, like the rest of us, but with more intensity, is suffering the consequences of the revolution that set up in 1774 that short-lived Temple of Reason, a new belief system created to replace Christianity. The cult of reason was based on the idealization of reason, virtue, and liberty without God. Our cult of diversity, inclusion, and equity has the same roots. Think about it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bruce. Now, Cherie was next, but we're still trying to reconnect with the power up north. It's pretty wild up there, so we may come back to her. So, Bob, you have 490 seconds starting now. There was an important Supreme Court decision out of the US last week. Now, if you read the mainstream media, it would have been something like, businesses can refuse to serve LGBTQ plus customers. Well, that's fake news. In this 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court held that the government cannot force you to say or produce something that violates your religious beliefs. That sounds like a pretty good decision, and it is. A woman, Laurie Smith, runs a website design company, and she wanted to start creating custom wedding websites, but was hesitant because she lives in Colorado. Not only is Colorado cannabis central, but you may have already heard about Jack, the baker, who refused to make a same-sex wedding cake or a gender transition celebration cake, and rightly so. Let me quote what the Heritage Foundation said as they summed up this Supreme Court case. They said, Laurie does business with all people, regardless of their sexual orientation, but what she will not do is use her creative talents to express a message that contradicts her personal beliefs, no matter who they are. She won't encourage violence or demean another person or promote atheism. She won't serve the white skinhead who wants to create a racist website. And why should she be forced to create a website that promotes pornography or a brothel? The line she draws has nothing to do with the customer, but with what the customer wants. Laurie to express in a website or graphic design. It's about freedom of speech and nothing else. You see, we must always fight a government from compelling people to speak its own preferred message. And this is why the headlines about this case and similar ones involving wedding vendors like cake makers, photographers, and florists are all wrong. If Laurie declines to do business with someone, it's because of the message that the person wants her to convey, not the characteristics of that person. Remember that next time you see a hysterical and false headline from our mainstream media. Last week's decision by the Supreme Court was another good day for freedom and faith and conscience. And that's why the media don't like it. Ate, your topic is... What is your topic? Hang on, stand by. Voter participation with the general election coming up. And your 90 or so seconds starts now.
Encourage the 20 to 30% of the population who are eligible to vote, but who do not vote. And the rate we're going at the moment, for many different reasons why people don't vote. But some of it is because they don't feel that the candidates are representing them in the parties. The problem is the funding that is going for the advertisement of labor, the money goes to labor, majority labor and national and X and green. So those who are fed up and don't want to vote for these parties, they are just going to continue to be alienated. How about distributing some money to the minor parties to at least help them and to give a representation to the people who do not vote? Otherwise, we're just going to continue doing on the same thing, and people do not get engaged in the process. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Now, Cherie, welcome back. Nice to have you. We've got the power back up north.
Yes.
And we skipped over you just for the free speech moment, but you want to talk about building a courage culture, which sounds a very nice byline. Your 90 seconds or so starts now.
It is a very nice byline. It was the byline of the recent Family First conference, in fact. I've been privileged to meet many courageous people through my work with Holocaust survivors. My husband and I have interviewed and photographed 69 survivors whose experiences were unfathomable. A few years ago, we travelled to the south of France to a place called Le Chambon-sur-Lignon to make a film about the events that transpired there. It involved a whole community that worked together to save Jewish people. The region had been a place for refuge for French Protestants escaping Catholic persecution since the 16th century. So the community had a heritage of standing against persecution and holding fast to its principles. During the Holocaust in this village and the surrounding villages, around 5,000 people worked together at great personal risk to save a similar number of Jews. Most of the cultured communities across Europe cooperated with a plot to destroy or plunder everything Jewish. But the people of Le Chambon chose otherwise. They defied the authorities. In the face of great evil, they refused to submit. They lived according to conscience, and some paid the ultimate price. One of the prominent leaders of the resistance was Pastor André Trocmé. When the Vichy government signed an armistice agreement with the Nazis in 1940, Pastor Trocmé addressed his parishioners with these words: "We face powerful heathen pressures on ourselves and our families, pressure to force us to cave in to this totalitarian ideology. If this ideology cannot immediately subjugate our souls, it will try at the very least to make us cave in with our bodies. The duty of Christians is to resist the violence directed at our consciences with the weapons of the Spirit." Pastor Trocmé preached spiritual resistance, and these humble villagers readily took up those weapons of compassion in what became known as a conspiracy of goodness. They serve as an inspiration for those of us today who feel the pressure to conform with what increasingly appears to be ideological totalitarianism.
Fantastic. Thank you. Right, Alfred, and you want to talk about the living years? Your 90 or so seconds starts now.
I've always told people that it's really important that if we want to change our community, we need to start off with our heart. That then affects our home, means that we've got authority to speak into our community. I was thinking about the other day that there's a song that was written in 1988 by a guy called Mike Rutherford. He used to be in a band called the Genesis Band, and he had a little side hustle, and it was called Mike and the Mechanics. There was a powerful song that was written called The Living Years. And in that song, he wrote the story, which actually reflected his relationship actually with his father and the impact of that relationship that it had in the way that he lived his life. And so this was his own personal journey and struggling with his relationship with his dad, which meant that everything he did around him was impacted, his home and the people around him as well. And it goes like this: every generation seems to blame the one before for all the frustrations coming beating at your door. And isn't it amazing? We sort of see at the moment that part of the narrative, the rhetoric that we see from one generation to the next. I mean, I've heard it on climate change marches, where often one generation will say it's the baby boomers, people like Bob and so forth, who are to blame for the fact of what we're having in our carbon footprint. And so this blame game is nothing new. And isn't it interesting, because here's Mike and the Mechanics. He begins to go on and he talks about this: crumpled bits of paper filled the imperfect thoughts, stilted conversations, I'm afraid that's all we've got. And he says it's perfect tense. Sense you just can't get agreement in this perfect tense. We all talk a different language, talking in defense. And you begin to see that because of the struggle he has personally in his own heart, it affects his home and it affects everything that we do. You know, I begin to see this narrative consistently playing out even in our own communities. And he comes down to the chorus, and I want to sort of then summarize where I think this is a very powerful thing. He says this, say it loud, say it clear. You can listen as well as you hear. It's too late when we die to admit that we don't see eye to eye. And this came because the morning that his father passed away, he wasn't there. He began to reflect the factors that he'd never dealt with, the indifferences in his own heart, that affected the factors that he'd now had a child that was a son, and he thought about how he would reflect on his relationship with his son, and then how would he impact the world around you. You know, this song became powerful in 1989. It became one of the most powerful ballads that began to make people of that generation, our generation, begin to think about the fact is, if you could deal with the issues in your heart, it would affect the way you handle and had peace in your home. And then we live in a generation now where we're actually repeating the same mistakes. Maybe in the living years, we need to sing the song, begin to see the lyrics, maybe learn the lesson, and maybe we could make a change as Mike did. Thank you.
Okay, and I'll just hand it over to DJ Bob, just to, this is the one, eh?
Oh, what it's going to go viral again.
This is just for all the youngies that haven't heard of Mike and the Mechanics. All right. Ronji, welcome back to New Zealand, as we said. And you want to talk about how good we've got it at home. Your 90 seconds starts now.
Hey, well, talofa lava family. It's been a while since I've been back here on Straight Talk. And look, I've just returned from doing some Christian missionary work in India and Nepal. We took a team of 9 Tongans and Samoans, all from beautiful South Auckland. It was an amazing time overseas, catching up with old friends and seeing the challenging realities that they faced here. India is now the 10th most dangerous country to be a Christian in the world. We met local pastors and missionaries being physically attacked, beaten, wrongfully imprisoned, churches being destroyed, people losing jobs because of their faith in Jesus Christ. Our dear friends in Bangalore run a ministry doing sex trafficking rescue ministry, abortion outreach, and pornography awareness workshops. And it was awesome to catch up with our friends and support the work again. Nepal is a stunning country, but Christians are facing huge persecution there as well. It was amazing to see the work that our local friends are doing for the gospel in Nepal's mountain villages and in Muslim areas too. One key reflection I have is this, family, as I come back to New Zealand. We are absolutely blessed and privileged to be living in New Zealand. We need to remember just how good we've got it here compared to most of the world. Do we have issues in our country? Man, absolutely, some massive ones. But in the scheme of things, we are in a relatively safe, wealthy nation with good healthcare, a welfare system, and many other blessings like being able to turn on the tap and get clean water just like that. Let's fix the issues here. And I guess that's what we're discussing here at Straight Talk. But compared to much of this world, we've got it good, and we can't forget how blessed we are to live in God's own.
Exactly right. Thank you, Ronji. Just checking out some of the comments, and Ulysses says Canberra should be ashamed of itself. It certainly should, for closing down that hospital or taking it over compulsorily. Colin says, Christine, that weather is Waiouru barbecue weather, what you're facing. So there we are. It's not as cold as you think. And Leslie says, thank you, Cherie. That really touched me. So well done. One of the things that we just realize is that if you are watching on Facebook, if you can just click the share button and share what you're watching to your feed, and then that will increase the reach, and a whole lot more people may watch what you're watching. So there's a little hint. Now, first topic, last Friday, 800 plus social conservatives gathered for the annual Forum on the Family in Auckland. And when I asked everyone who watched Straight Talk, virtually every hand went up, except for Ronji's, I noticed, Ronji, although I think you were still in the food hall. And there was a good representation from faith leaders, community leaders, ex-politicians, political party leaders were there, including Helen Houghton from New Conservatives, Leighton Baker, Brian and Hannah Tamaki, One party representatives, Winston Peters, got to hear Walt Heyer, Chloe Cole and Alfred in the afternoon. And everyone from the panel was there. So we thought we would just quickly go around the panel and ask them what was their highlight and key takeaway from the forum on the family last Friday. So let's start from the bottom. We'll start with you, Bruce. Key takeaway, highlight of the forum?
Well, my highlights are pretty ordinary, really. But one of them was meeting interesting people and learning something from them. That was great fun. I think in getting up to date with what's actually going on in the world and getting a lot of information that while I might well have known a little bit about it, I learned a great deal more. And it was an encouragement to me.
And most interesting person you met, Bruce?
Oh, do I have to say that, do I?
Well, I think I know who it is, wasn't it? It was who you sat next to dinner on Friday night. It was John Anderson, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, John Anderson. Certainly I had the best conversation with him. Yes.
Well, you both use big words, that's why. Cherie, highlight?
This one, that's a bit hard. The whole conference was excellent. All the speakers were really great. And I really liked the book ending of your presentation, Bob, which really laid out gave us understanding about this cultural moment we're in, the pressures and the trends. It was very succinct and clear. And then the conference finishing with Alfred's message. Alfred was on fire there and talking about the importance of the history in this land and remembering it. So excellent all around. I guess Walter Heyer, who did transitioned, I just found that very, very enlightening actually to hear his story and quite profound. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Ate?
Thank you, Bob. I was absolutely encouraged. Gave me so much hope being there. One end was Lila Rose, to see this young person with the face of the millennium pro-life movement, and to know that she said yes to God when she was 15 and see how her faithfulness and is changing the world and saving so many babies. And then the other end is Walt Heyer at 82, still fighting, helping people who are wanting to to change. And I love the fact that he gave some tools. We all know that it's wrong and sad. It's going to destroy people when they start down that track. But when he said, it's childhood emotional trauma, and ask the person, when did you decide to change? What made you want to change? And those are just good keys and tools for all of us who are working in the area. And of course, one of my favorite was the Manly boys, those Samoan and Tongan boys who would not give up their their right and to know what is right, and not having to wear those other rainbow bright jersey. And they know what happened. They knew what happened to Israel Folau, but good for the Tongan and the Samoan boys, eh? Got guts. Yeah.
And if you're wondering about that interview, we're releasing it tomorrow. So you'll be able to see that interview on social media and on YouTube. We'll send it out. It's a fascinating interview with two of the Manly Seven. Christine, lovely to have you there on Friday. What was your highlight?
Look, I think the whole conference was a class act. I go to a lot of conferences and I speak at a lot of conferences, and I haven't been to one that had that feeling for a long, long time. My highlight was Lila Rose. I think that her information and the way she shares it is very, very powerful. And I've been anti-abortion for a long, long time. But, I didn't know what the process does to a baby. And I think when most human beings hear what actually happens to the baby, it will, I'm trying to think of the word, but it'll definitely change people's minds about the fact it's just a really simple procedure and it all goes away, and it's she really touched me, and I'm not afraid to talk about what that process is, and I'm certainly going to, so I will never forget that. I thought she did it magnificently, but the whole conference was great. And I have to say, Bob, a lot of people commented on your opening address and thought it was the best of the conference. A lot of people made that comment to me, so well done you, but well done for, I remember your first conference conference. I was there, and there was literally a handful of people compared
100.
to this one. And this
Yep.
one was so powerful. And what does that say about when we're all together, if we can all march as an army for God? What does that actually do? We don't do it. We don't use it enough. And, we talked about courage tonight. We need to have a lot more courage. But thank you.
Alfred, apart from the final speaker, what was your highlight?
Well, no, look, I'd agree with Christine. I think, Bob, to have the acknowledgement of John Anderson and a number of others about your presentation, I mean, it was world class. I mean, we're talking about, international speakers acknowledging what you had put together, which I think is outstanding, and that was great. But then we had Walt. I think he must have hung out with Ronji, because he started making some very interesting remarks about you, like needing cosmetic surgery. And then to see your wife, Tina, who I won't mention her name, but then sort of jump up and sort of applaud that, that was a precious moment. But two things to finish off is that I had a father come and say to me that the teenage daughter that he had, when she listened to Lila Rose, she was in the conference, she leaned over and just with tears and she said to him, that could have been me. My biological mother wanted that to happen. And it was quite a powerful healing moment for her. And so just want to say that was really powerful. And the second one, was about the Manly Seven, and a father the next day who was there, and his young daughter was there. And she made the comment, I think I need to marry a man like that. I just need to tell them they're probably Rarotongan rather than Tongan and Samoan. I don't know. I'll just maybe spread that rumor. But no, very powerful. Fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. Finally, Ronji, highlights?
Hey, look, heaps of highlights. I can't stand conferences. I avoid them as much as possible. But it was wonderful being in a room of like-minded people, powerful speakers. I love the gospel focus and the unashamed gospel focus, because I believe that is the most articulate worldview that answers life's big questions and answers life's big philosophical questions as well. Thought the MC was terrible, but that's a different comment as well. I guess the takeaway I'd have is I love the challenge that they gave in terms of engaging in these ideological and cultural wars in a winsome way, which I thought was a really beautiful way to try and frame it. But at the same time, the speakers kept emphasizing that we should still contend for the truth regardless of the cost. So it's that balance of how do you do it in a winsome way, but still contend for truth? If I can give one observation, please, Bob, I would have loved to see more local content, to be honest. I love the international focus and the international speakers that were there, but to try and apply those things in a local context, I think a lot of people were having that discussion with me throughout the Friday, but how do we take all of that learning and put it into our New Zealand context? So that's a bit of feedback, but massive congrats to you and the team. It was awesome, Marlo.
Okay, fantastic. Right, let's move on. Next topic, a new survey has found that trust in the police is declining. It suggests that more than 5,000 Kiwis were polled as part of the New Zealand Crime and Victims Survey run by the Ministry of Justice. It found that just over 2 in 3 of us had trust and confidence in police. So 1 in 3 of us don't, and the confidence level has dropped 5% compared to the previous survey. Now, at the same time, of course, we saw that story about a Christchurch business owner and tradies performing a citizen's arrest, tackling a thief to the ground after he stole motorcycle parts, and police told the workmates to let him go. The Christchurch Metro Area Commander said police couldn't attend every call-out due to the nature of police work, and they had to prioritise cases, apparently. And so therefore there's sort of concern, do we have enough police? Are they available? Are they prioritising what the general public are concerned about? And of course, I think people are also a little bit concerned about sort of the police inaction at the recent Posey Parker rally, standing a little bit too far back when it was quite clear there was going to be violence at that march. That certainly concerned me. So let's just go around the panel. I just want to find out, do you trust the police? And why do you think the trust may have dropped in this survey? So let's start from where we finished off. Ronji, what do you think?
Hey, look, family, look, I'll confess, I've had my own run-ins with the police in my time. So I've struggled with the police, especially in South Auckland over time. But I have come over the years to respect and acknowledge the necessity and the importance of the profession. So, look, I do trust the police. I think that it's a cornerstone of providing safety and law and order in our society. I think part of the reason why we're losing trust in the police is, one, I wonder if police are too busy being told to be social workers and counselors rather than to actually police crime. And then secondly, I wonder if the media has pushed that whole narrative that with ram raids and so on, and with gangs taking over towns and all that kind of stuff. I have a lot of boys who are coppers, and the job is hard. And the boys talk to me about it. We pray about some of this stuff. I know cops who are getting shot up in South Auckland. Their houses are getting attacked by the gangs, and so it's a really difficult area. So I do think we should trust the police more, but I just don't think this kind of government is allowing police to be policemen or police officers. Right? I think they're more social workers and counselors nowadays.
Okay, Alfred, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree with that. Well, first of all, I want to say that I do have trust in our police. I trust the institution because it's the institution that creates law and order and upholds law in our communities, and that's really important. But what I do think is that the politics of the day has got too far involved and embedded into policing. And so what I mean by that, we've actually seen that there's more choice rather than consequence at the moment. And I see that the new policies that are coming out are focused on consequences. Now, consequences are not just meant to be, a stick, as people would say, and then it's not just a carrot. Actually, there's a variety of different things that are involved in that. And so I think it's important that we need to make sure that we allow the politics to be out of the police to do the jobs that they're, commissioned to be able to take. But I just want to say that what really disturbed me was the article, Bob, that you'd sent through to us. And what it said was trust in police falls among men, straight people, and Pākehā. So when did we start reporting and creating divisions in how we classify how people see things? All of a sudden, a gender, a sexuality orientation of being straight is now being regarded and questioned. Now, to me, that's a real concern. And that's a real breakdown. And by the way, if you read the report, it's 69.5% is what the current trust rate is. That's still incredibly high. Has it fallen down? Yes. Where Andy Costa has basically talked about the areas he thinks it's around COVID. I actually think it's also about the protest. All of those things are around how political leaders have conducted themselves. The unfortunate reality is that the police have had to be at the front end of imposing all of those rules by the politics and the politicians of the day. And so I've got a real concern. Too much politics in policing. We need to allow them to do what they were commissioned to do.
Okay, Ate, has your trust been affected?
Yes, I think we will be lying if we ignore the elephant in the room. I think the police are doing a great job, and they put their lives at risk. But I think as far as the trust has dropped significantly, what happened in Parliament at the beginning of the year, when how people were treated by the police, lots of people won't forget that. And of course, there's always two sides to the story, but a lot of it was driven by the media. And of course, as Alfred was saying, was driven also politically, where MPs were just hiding as wimps inside Parliament and just looking and not coming out and talking to the people and put the police out there. That is so disgustingly and unfair. So what a National is putting out, this what Luxon is, it's not going to work. So much money has been poured in, and it does not work. They need to give the money to the people who know what is going on in his work. We mentioned Men Up last week. The prison workers know what is going on, has been mentioned. And, the police know. I mean, for goodness sake, a Labour MP went in to see the mongrel mob. What on earth are they doing but looking for votes? Just stop the nonsense and get on with it. Thanks.
Okay, Christine, do you trust the police? Has it been affected in any way over the last 12 months?
I think the police are in one hell of a state, and I agree with Alfred that politics is playing a big part in that. I think it's much bigger than a lot of people realise. They have a woke police commissioner. He was chosen for a purpose, and the government use him, and he plays the game. And I've been a chief executive in the public service. I know exactly what it's like to be told what to do by your minister, and if you don't do it, but he is a willing participant. And the reality is that, if you know any police at all, and Ronji has said he knows a lot, I do too, they are desperate. They are desperate to be able to do their job. And there are big political instructions about who they're allowed to do things to and who they're not. They have to turn their head for some people, and they have to take action against people that they don't want to. It's a pretty sick thing that's going on in there at the moment, and I feel so sorry for them, because we do rely on them, and they have always been respected in this country, and they deserve it. It's not their fault. This is a dangerous political game, and we will never have it admitted by the politicians, but they have caused enormous problems for the police for the last 6 years, and it's getting worse. When I was a little girl, my mother used to take me shopping once a week into the square in Christchurch, and always stopped for me to talk to the policeman who was inevitably there, because we were raised to absolutely respect the police. You've got to question how many people think about it like that now. I feel so sorry for them.
Yeah, it is a tough job, Cherie. I mean, do you think, or can you figure out why the trust may have dropped?
Yeah, I think the things that people have already mentioned, the politicisation, I think is very real, and Posey Parker was a prime example of that. This tiny woman, the police were there, but she was not protected, and her life was in danger against this angry mob. And so you've got to ask questions, why were the police not protecting this woman? And that was so shameful for New Zealand, that she fled the country that afternoon because she feared for her life, and that made a huge news overseas. And so there is that political agenda. And I know of situations where the police are refusing to intervene because of the optics, because of the way that it's going to look. So as others have said, I agree that that's happened. And I do think it's significant, the demographic that has that's been shown to have a lower level of trust than previously, because we know from the history that Māori Pacific have had a low level of trust because of their experience of what happened in the Uruweras, what happened with the Pacific, the raids on immigration during the 70s. And so that has been a long-standing thing. But this recent drop in trust, I think, is quite new, and I think it is quite revealing and interesting that it coincides. Well, it came around the time of the COVID response, and I think that's significant as well. And I also want to say that I know, young police men and women, and they're wonderful people, and they're doing their best. So I don't want to kind of displace individual police, but it's the whole system that's really facing a lot of challenges at the moment. But I also want to add another thing, is that I think we've just seen a few too many miscarriages of justice. And Peter Ellis is one who recently was exonerated after his death. And that was a situation where the police had determined what the outcome was, and the evidence was kind of geared towards a particular end. And I've seen this happen countless times. I've seen this happen in a personal situation where the police decided what they wanted to get, and their investigations were directed along a certain line, and they weren't looking at all the evidence. And I think also we may come to talk about gangs when we look at the policy, but this seems to be true when dealing with gangs as well. So there's research done by Dr. Jared Gilbert, and he talks about the lens of blue vision, which he says, and I quote, "It exists when police uphold a belief regardless of the evidence against it." He says that the false story becomes ingrained in the collective police culture, and they are blind to anything that may contradict it. So I think there's a whole range of issues, not least of which that we seem to be the police seem to be under-resourced, and they just don't have enough personnel to deal with the upsurge in crime at the moment.
Okay. Bruce, I'm sure you don't have any run-ins with the police, but has your trust declined at all?
I do trust the police, but I probably don't trust them as much as I used to. And I'm tend to be in Alfred and Christine's school. I think the police force has become politicised, and that is a problem. And there are obvious examples of that, and some of them we mentioned tonight. I think we could probably improve things a bit if we went a little bit back into the past and we had the idea of police being more immediately available to us. We used to have what we used to call bobbies on the beat and see people from time to time, see police from time to time walking the streets, and we would see them, and that would be a comfort, I think, to us. And I wouldn't mind seeing a policeman and a policewoman walking about around the place a lot more, not necessarily hand in hand, of course, but they could walk about and be something of an encouragement to us. And it would create a friendliness that we need. And we need to see, because we just see police now flying past in a car, probably with a siren on. And that's not a good trick if that's all we see of them, because we don't see enough of them, personally. I think that would be much better. And I think that's a significant change. We used to see police more and on the beat, certainly, even on bicycles, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
And so we could do that. I don't think it would be very hard to do.
Okay, now just very quickly, team, the National Party did release some law and order policy, and I just want to get your very quick comment on what you like and what you don't like. So they want to give more support to victims, more focus on prisoners' rehabilitation, to drop the prisoner reduction target and just put people in prison who need to be put in prison, I think is what they're saying. A 40% limit on the amount by which a judge can reduce a sentence, and scrapping cultural reports. Cherie, you seem keen to talk about this particular one, so can I come to you first? What do you like? What don't you like?
Well, in general, I like the idea that they're going to focus more on the consequences rather than the current Labor policy, which seems to be about reduction of prison numbers, which seems crazy given that, you know, the crime rate is through the roof. But I guess the thing which you haven't actually mentioned but was in the report was this idea of gang membership as an aggravating factor. Right. And I just feel that's a little bit simplistic, and that the focus should be on the crime rather than the association, because I guess my concern is that you can be held guilty by association and that justice may not be done. And we already see this happening. You know, I can give you examples where, for example, a Black Power leader has been imprisoned, even though everyone knows he didn't commit the crime, he wasn't there, but because they've decided that he was a leader, so therefore he was responsible, he's been imprisoned. So to me, that is that's injustice. And so by moving forward with making that even firmer or harder with this this policy that they're proposing, I think it just opens the door to further injustice.
Okay, Ronji, what did you think? Was there anything you liked on it, didn't like on it?
Yeah, policy looks good on paper, to be honest. I think the whole focus on more support for victims is really important, but the policy is saying that the support for victims is going to come from scrapping the cultural reports. And I'm a little bit two-minded about that, because I've seen the value of cultural reports, but they've just been abused by the lawyers to try and get discounted sentences. So the whole thing around focusing on increasing support of victims is good. It just needs more. And the policy is actually quite light on anything to do with unclogging the court system and also around reintegration. So I think those things are glaring misses within this policy.
Okay. I actually want to move on. So do any of you other panelists want to say something on this particular one? Or forever hold your peace?
I just want to say...
Yeah, go on, Alfred and then Christine.
Oh, no, just quickly, I think one of the things is that just around rehabilitation, it all starts off good from the outset, but then fails because we don't create the commitment. And it's the assimilation program. Once you come out of incarceration, once you're out of prison, actually that's where we've often failed, to be able to ensure that there are opportunities for employment, opportunity around the culture of how people coming out of prison can change their lives. And I think the other thing too, around rehabilitation, the drug and alcohol courts that were initiated actually were a great success, but they weren't supported in many ways that they could have. And so those are just two things I think we could do better.
Okay. Christine?
I agree. Rehabilitation's huge. People don't understand. They don't even start rehabilitation till their last year of their sentence. That is madness. It needs to start on day one. A lot of those people need so much help, and that means they can reintegrate. It's always a big, big challenge for them. But the fact we haven't done that is criminal in itself.
Okay. Need to move.
I think some of the policies are not dealing with the root of the problem. Unless you address the root of the problem. Like, for example, the kids who are doing ram raids are being paid by, gang members, and the kids are wanting to, end points so that they can be part of the gangs and stuff. And the police and the prison officers know what is going on, but they're just too scared. So we need to deal with so if you deal with the gang and cut it right there, and then generations will be free, rather than just doing, a cut and paste of some policies for voters.
Okay, well done. You all managed to sneak in a comment there. Well done. Right, next topic. Some disturbing examples of banks closing the accounts of generally Christian ministries that they don't agree with. 2 years ago, Barclays Bank closed the International Federation for Therapeutic and Counselling Choices account. And that's actually an organisation that I went to Hungary and spoke at. They do counselling for people with unwanted sexuality and gender issues. Mike Davison, I spoke at his conference last year, and he made comments about what the bank had done.
It troubles me. This is the bank that my grandfather served, my father served, and now just because I hold a specific viewpoint, we have been denied access to regular banking in the United Kingdom. To have Barclays Bank come against us simply on the grounds that we support therapeutic choice, I think is a mistake. It's a mistake for the bank. It's a mistake for the country. It seems to be an attempt simply to gratify LGBT activists who want to express their viewpoint at the expense of everybody else.
Okay, and Barclays Bank actually had to pay the trust £20,000 as recompense because of this, but they're not the only example. There's just a recent example. Reverend Richard Fothergill had his account closed by the Yorkshire Building Society. Have a watch of just this little clip.
Obviously, I had this account for 17 years, and YBS have been a very good provider of managing my money for that long period. And I just before June started, YBS have always been sending stuff out to their members saying, give us your feedback, how are we doing? Right. We want to hear from you, and this kind of stuff. So just before June kicked off, it was noticeable that they were going to push Pride, the Pride LGBTQ thing, for the month of June. So I thought, well, okay, I'll give them some feedback. And so that's what I did. I wrote in there on their portal just a couple of paragraphs. It really wasn't a very substantial thing, saying really 2 points. One was, isn't this a bit of a waste of your energies? Because primarily you're there to manage money, not do social engineering. And then secondly, I as a minister in the church have serious ethical problems with the transsexual agenda. Right. And that's that one particular thing, and particularly transsexual agenda basically impacting children. Yeah. And they're wanting to have access to children. I gave actually a little link clip to the news reports about drag queen story hour, which has been going on in America and is going on, unfortunately, a bit in this country too. Just to kind of reference point that. And I thought really, almost certainly the customer relations department will bin it, they'll just ignore that. I thought maybe if they've got 100 other similar questions like this from their members, they might think, oh, well, perhaps there's something in this. Perhaps we shouldn't push this gay pride stuff so much. So I heard nothing until last week, and then I got a rather surprising letter from them saying rather extreme things like, the relationship between us has irrevocably broken down. I thought, oh, really? This is the first I've heard about it on this letter. And so we're going to close your account. End of story. You've got 14 days to take the money out of the account, and that's it. So that's where we are now.
Okay, so two incredible cases, and so I'm keen to hear from the panel. What do you think about the prospect of banks refusing to allow certain groups to use their services? And we're aware of cases in New Zealand where this has happened, and also, for example, PayPal closed a few accounts that they didn't like as well. Bruce,
Yes.
is it a concern?
Yes, it is. I couldn't believe when I first came across it about the situation with Nigel Farage having trouble with his bank. I mean, I eventually came to believe it because I found out it was true. But this commercial activism that seems to be creeping into banks looks very much like a kind of creeping totalitarianism to me. As if a person or an institution has power, they will use that power. Now, a bank isn't a moral policeman. It's not in the business of shaping public morality, and certainly it's not in the business of treating customers according to what the bank thinks about them either. It's not a political tool, and that's particularly worrying now that we're looking at digital currency on the horizon. And then, on the issue of Nigel Farage, then I remembered about the truckers in Canada. Justin Trudeau closed down their bank accounts. Now, a bank has, it seems to me, not a conscience, as it seems to think it has, but just responsibilities. Its responsibilities are to guard our money, use our money to our advantage, assist in business development by responsible lending, and maybe more recently by money laundering. It seems if you're going to close accounts that the bank doesn't like, it doesn't seem to be much different to me from having an individual insisting on some other public service doing his or her will, or a shop doing his or her will, the old Canadian cake situation. And I suppose, as a kind of an example, I suppose, that a gift shop owned by a Muslim should sell menorahs, I could insist. But that's no different from the bank telling its customers that it should think of what it should think about menorahs. And it's just not in that business.
Okay. Christine, does it concern you?
I find it disconcerting in the extreme.
I think Christianity has been being cancelled for a long, long time. And the reason it continues to be is because we are so unresponsive. You know, people might individually respond, but I've talked about it before. You know, if you did anything like this to someone from the Muslim faith, they would be marching in the streets. They would be fighting for their cause every step of the way. Someone said to me a long time ago, before I was a Christian, that Christianity had been feminized, that we're taught to be gentle and quiet. It's never going to work with me, but to be gentle and quiet and kind. And, you know, you don't respond, you just pray and everything will be all right. God helps those who help themselves. And we need to start fighting back, like with everything we've got. Why on earth do we sit there and put up with this rubbish? You had all of those people in one room last week, Bob. You can't tell me there would have been one of them that would have turned down a great big protest about this. If we stood up for what we believed in and not put up with this, it'd stop happening.
Okay, Ronji, I saw you having a good chuckle there.
Hey, look, this is just another example of corporate bullying. But I think one of the things I loved about this story was the fact that there was the Christian Legal Center that was supporting CIT. And I think the fact that the CLC actually existed and the fact that they were supporting CIT and standing up against the corporate bullying was wonderful. So that was one of my favorite parts of the story. I think one thing we need to think about, we can't be surprised about this stuff. There's no neutrality in these things. We've got to pick sides, and the sides are being picked for us. One thing I want to think, ask us to think about, Bob, is I wonder if it makes us wonder about putting together lists of businesses that are ethical, that are safer, that we are able to work with, whether it is a bank or a building company or whatever, that aren't going to go woke, but can actually work with us in a fair, ethical way. So I wonder if that kind of list needs to be developed. And my final comment is, in the New Zealand context, we have discrimination laws, anti-discrimination laws that we should be leaning on and fighting with, just like Christine was saying. But we also have the banking ombudsman. The banking ombudsman currently is a very good friend of mine, and if this kind of rubbish pops up, I am happy to fight alongside whoever that might be who's facing these kinds of banking issues with the ombudsman, because we need to use the systems that are there to contend for what is right, true, and beautiful.
Alfred, are you surprised to see this type of thing happening?
No, not surprised. I like what Ronji is saying. I think the thing is that while we should use the institutions that are there, I think it's actually a good time to actually test the whole theory. Say, for instance, if a Barclay situation happened to us here, like with a Westpac or an ANZ or whomever, how would that ombudsman, do they have the tools? Do they have the framework of the policy and legislation that would allow them to be able to do the right thing, as you've been saying, Ronji? I think that's important. I also totally agree with what Christine's saying, because for too long we sort of, when we look at the Beatitudes in the book of Matthews, we look at the word meek. And I remember one non-Christian guy said to me, there's one thing I really hate is that word meek. And he said, that's why you Christians are so weak. And he thought it was being clever. So I said to him, well, do you know what the definition of meek is? And he said, no, it's called power under control. And if you're not careful, you're going to see some power uncontrolled coming your way. But anyway, that was a long time when I was younger. But you're right. Christine's right. It's time now to us to, and I think we can show that power through being really smart. And so Woke Up, Ronji, is actually, I think that's amazing. I think it's great, Family First and the work that they're doing behind that. It couldn't come any sooner. I think it's time now that we can show as Christians, say, well, let's take our consumer power somewhere else. Let's let them pay for it. Let's let them see that, yep, that's fine. You want to be a bully? Well, here are the consequences of your actions. And we start to do that. But I do think we should, number one, test what the institutions that are out there, are they equipped to do the job to protect the rights of all citizens, and especially religious freedom. And the last thing, I think it's great that Ethos with Alex Pink are now getting off the ground, and I'm sure that they'll get some great support. So that's awesome.
Okay. Ate and Shri, can I come to you on the next question, please? Because we just got one more topic that we really want to move on to, unless you're desperate to say something about this one.
Yes, I want to say something about. I want to say something about it. I am not surprised what's happening. It's come into the commercial and the banking, but it's they've done it in the health sector about abortion. The teacher we talked about last week. So it's just bullying. Kiwi Bank, New Zealander of the Year, a trans, and he's just been so terrible, the things he's said publicly. So it's happening here in New Zealand, as you've said. The Bible says, why don't we have a go, get people all together, Acts 2:42, the believers came together and share. Let's put our stuff together and buy silver and gold. The bank can't control that. Founders of universities, Harvard and those, they had guts and they build. Why don't we have our own bank? Just a thought. Thank you, Bob.
Okay. You don't mind me missing you, Shri? I'll come to you first for this last one. Okay, we just want to talk about mental health and social media. The Pew Research did some research, and just quickly, what they found was that YouTube is the platform most commonly used by teenagers. 2/3 of teens report using TikTok, but roughly 1 in 5 teens are constantly on social media of some sort. And more than half of the teens say it would be hard to give up social media. Girls are more likely than boys to struggle to give it up. And teens are more likely to report positive than negative experiences, but 1/3 say that what they see on social media makes them feel overwhelmed because of all the drama, etc. Interestingly, only a minority of teens say their parents are concerned about their social media use. But when you ask the parents, you actually find out that, no, they are very concerned about what's happening with their teens. So, simple question, and as I said, I'm going to start with you, Cherie, is should we be concerned about social media and the effect it's having on the mental health of our young people?
Yeah, absolutely. And the studies show that particularly for young women, it affects their mental health, and they have a high suicide rate. And studies show that, for example, with Instagram, that they spend time on Instagram and afterwards they feel dissatisfied with how they look. And so it's very harmful, and also the addictiveness of it is harmful. There's a great quote I found that the smartphone is the modern day hypodermic needle, delivering digital dopamine 24/7 for a wired generation. So, yeah, I think there's great reason to be concerned.
Okay, it's just turned 9 o'clock, so Ronji's about to check out mentally. So, Ronji, could you just comment on this before you do?
Yeah, no, look, I'm not surprised by it all. The levels of anxiety, stress, and distress that young people are facing are through the roof, and I think that's translating to things in our education system and what's happening in society around some of the misbehavior and so on. So I think there's not surprised by it. Also, I don't. Yeah, none of this stuff surprises me. One thing I did think about though was the connection to this in pornography. And just wondering what's happening there in that space. I know the Light Project did some wonderful research in New Zealand, but I just don't know where that's gotten to in terms of providing not just awareness and education, but the need to provide more protection for our young people when it comes to porn and access to those different kinds of things. So this stuff is unsurprising, and unfortunately, this is going to last for a long time. The more we have social media, we just need to think about what are the solutions and alternatives to that if we can. Get them off the devices, hopefully get them out playing sports. But I really do want to acknowledge the connection between that social media stuff and porn addiction, even for our young people, and what do we need to do as a community about those as well.
Alfred, as a politician, ex-politician, I mean, it just seems like the politicians don't want to go near this issue or don't think they have responsibility, and yet it seems to be a huge concern. Even, why aren't they interested?
Yeah, look, it is a concern. Look, I can remember that we were in a select committee and we had a report from the chief censor. One of the biggest challenges he had was the fact is the unregulated access into, explicit materials, pornography and so forth. But also, too, you think about some of the gaming around at the moment. I mean, you can play games like Grand Theft Auto, and yes, it's got an age restriction, but the reality is that many young people are accessing that. And I think that's, a real concern. I think they don't want to step into that space, the politicians, because really the answer lies in the personal space of parents disengaging from their children. If you look at the data, you've got children, a lot of the teens who say, oh no, parents don't think it's a problem. You've got parents actually saying it is a problem. So there's an issue here. They're disengaging with each other. Disassociation from reality has been happening for a long time, but mobile technology has now accelerated it. And so we're no longer doing things like, the good old days when you go camping, play cards and board games and stuff like that. I got to tell you, Bob, that we've done that with our kids ever since they were young. We still play sequence. It's like it's the new Monopoly. It is brutal, but we laugh and things like this. But we've and what is it? What am I saying? I said the answer actually lies in the home, and it's time for us to begin to think about that, because that data shows there's a complete disengagement with kids and with parents, and it's the easy out. Yep, they're on their phone, and we just excuse it. We need to stop doing things like no phones on the table during dinner time. We basically shut things down. And last thing, I love what you've said, which is related to certain businesses. Good Source, that provide a clean portal into the IT platforms and social media. Those are the sorts of organisations we need to be supporting.
Yep. Ate, have you seen this evident in just your work?
Yep, absolutely. Mental health, depression, suicide, and totally agree with what has been said. Comes back to the home. Unfortunately, tired parents use their smart, stupid phones as babysitting devices. And, like for Pacific people, a lot of the parents have no idea of what's going on in the bedroom. And I always ask the question, who's in the bedroom with your son or your daughter? Because we won't let just a stranger come into the bedroom and spend all night with your young ones. But that's what's happening. So, pornography and addiction, we need help. Thanks.
Yep. Okay. Christine?
I don't think I can add very much. I think it's absolutely out of control, and I agree with Alfred that family time is the answer, but good luck with that across the board. I don't know how the hell we turn this back. I really don't.
And Bruce, any final comments?
It's just one thing. All those terrible things that people have been talking about are true, I'm sure. But there's an Achilles heel in simple social media, and that is that it exchanges the reality of a personal relationship into a kind of a fantasy relationship. You don't look each other in the eye, and you don't have to accept responsibility that normal relationships necessitate. And so it does encourage the living out of a kind of life which is essentially a fantasy and doesn't allow people to really become strong enough to attend difficulties in life. And that's a worry that I have about it.
Yeah. Okay, well done, team. We got through the topics, and Ronji desperately needs his beauty sleep, as we can see. So that is it. We are out of time. We will be back next Monday night at 8 o'clock. Thanks to all the panel. Did a fantastic job, and we will see you next week for Straight Talk.